Hi, we're here with Magnus Lindkvist, the world-renowned futurologist, trendspotter, and author of best-selling books. Hi, Magnus.
Hi, Lorenzo.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
As you know, in Novaxia we are working on habits, and you are a world-renowned trendspotter and futurologist. So how can you explain us, how can you predict the future in such uncertain times?
Well, first of all, not everything is uncertain. I mean, this past summer, for instance, most of us probably relaxed by, barbecuing meat and drinking beer, just like they did in the Middle Ages. So not everything changes, and I think that's the first key to predicting things. It's what can you predict and what can you never predict. And of course, things that never change are easily predictable. Gravity, many habits. I listened to Jeff Bezos of Amazon speak, and he said, it's unlikely that Amazon customers in the future will say, "You're delivering too fast, please slow down."
Yeah.
So that's why he says, "I invest in speedy delivery because I think it's a timeless value." On the other end of the spectrum, we have things like acquiring new knowledge. It was wisely said by Karl Popper, the philosopher, that you can never predict what you will know in the future, because if you could, you would already know it.
Right.
And similarly, if you would predict the invention of the wheel, you would already have invented it. So I think that's the spectrum. On one hand, we have habits, gravity, natural laws, and on the other side, we have things like Gangnam Style, which can never be predicted.
Right.
So that's step one, to predict the future. And then you have to, of course, have another balance, which is predict. And the problem with prediction is that, of course, are you going to be like a deer in the headlights, frozen because you've predicted something? Or are you going to create the future? So prediction versus creation. And I would argue a big part of what you do, and the reason you have this project, is, of course, how can you create performance-driven habits, which is more about creating an outcome, a different outcome, challenging your predictions, challenging your prejudices. But of course, not everything can be created. No matter how hard I will a tennis ball to go sideways,
Right.
It's not going to. So that, I think those are the balancing act. Can be predicted, cannot be predicted, creation versus prediction, and then balance these couple of factors together.
Right. Okay. In these uncertain times, though, what would you suggest us to do as companies or managers or entrepreneurs? What kind of habits would you suggest to have to be able to predict the future, or at least reduce uncertainty?
So let's frame this first. Uncertain times. I don't think these times are especially uncertain if you compare to what happened for centuries or millennia.
Right.
But if we go back maybe 50 years, society was a little bit more stable and stale. You probably knew what you were going to work with, and you had higher job security, and technology didn't move as fast as we feel, and we weren't particularly globalized, especially not in our news consumption. So we didn't see big dramatic events every day,
Right.
like we do today. So when you say that things are uncertain, it's actually not a comment about the future, it's a comment about the present. And it's actually a comment about the past, because what is it uncertain compared to? Well, it's uncertain compared to where we were.
Right. Yeah.
And I think that's, for me, a very important distinction. But to take your question then at face value, if we live in uncertain times, how can you use these predictive models and start to think? Well, first of all, I believe we need to understand what it is we want to solve or look at. There is so much, one of the biggest things we suffer from today as human beings is infobesity. You're well informed, but your brain is full of crap.
Yeah.
And this is similar to food. Food used to be scarce. I mean, that's why we have Christmas with lots of food, because in the old times you didn't have that much food, and then you spoiled yourself silly for Christmas and then back to starvation. Similarly, information, right? It used to be very scarce, difficult to get a hold of. If somebody knew something, that was valuable. Today, of course, we are bombarded by tweets, headlines, emails, SMS on a daily basis. And people need to stop, or at least slow down, reflect, and craft an information diet for themselves. You know, what are the information sources that's going to feed into my worldview? Which ones are going to challenge it? Which ones don't I need? There's a lot of distractive information in our wake, you know, which hinders our constructive thinking. So instead of saying it's uncertain times and there are lots of things happening, rise of China, possible fall of Italy, the euro crisis, technology, hold on, slow down. You know, let's craft an information diet out of this. What's the important sources? Secondly, let's take a longer term perspective. The cliche of technology is that it's moving so fast, but we see many examples in technology where things still take 7 years to take off.
Right.
There's a law of 7 years. If you want to launch a product, it takes 7 years. If you want to launch a website, it usually takes 7 years to go from nothing, not even a blip on the radar, to a fully sustainable business model, and of course many fail on the way. So let's not get caught up in this hyperbole of speed, insecurity, uncertainty. Let's be a little bit more constructive and rational in our thinking. Then I would say be contrarian. Right? Contrarianism is a very useful tool when it comes for crafting new performance habits in future thinking. Because we see today how rules change quite quickly.
Right.
Possibly takes 7 years, but rules used to change maybe over 7 generations, and now they change in 7 years. So take a contrarian view. So today everybody's doing it this way. And human beings are copiers, right? We love copying behaviors and copying habits and copying symbols like rings to symbolize marriage and so on. So people will always move in a herd, and if you want to find a more successful path, contrarianism is extremely useful. In a world where everybody says, this is the truth, try to think about what is the opposite of what they're saying.
Right.
It's a surprisingly useful thought. It's not always right. It sometimes leads you astray, but I found it's a very useful thinking tool.
Okay. In a company or in a big or small companies, one of the main difficulties is to launch a new project. We know that more than 90,000 products fail every year.
Yes.
And more than 50% of all startups fail. So it would be great to have some skills in project planning and know what will succeed and what will not. Of course, you cannot be sure, but how come some are very successful and get it almost always right and somebody doesn't?
Well, your question ties into a very dangerous idea, which is also the subject of my next book that I've just started researching. It's a very, very dangerous idea called luck. And the reason luck is dangerous is if luck exists, it means that a big part of the business literature is not valid at all. Yeah. And we're a little bit afraid of luck because we can't control it. We also dismiss luck. We hate luck. We look down on things. Oh, that's just luck. He was just lucky. So we have a very strange relationship to luck. But of course, like you say, the norm is failure. Right? The norm is failure. Some manage to break out of that space and reach a level of success. And when something is successful, we start making up stories. Why do they succeed? And in those stories are never luck. And the problem with this is that we start doing plans for success. And we go back to the copying mindset. Can we copy success? Can we emulate success? Can we do more of what they did? Which sometimes succeeds, sometimes doesn't. If it's a big, fast-growing market, there's room for everyone, but nothing grows forever, so sooner or later there will be a tipping point downwards. What I usually tell the students that I meet is, you shouldn't plan for success. You should plan for an adventure. What I tell companies is the same thing. Don't plan for success. Plan for an adventure, or as it's known in the business world, for a venture.
Right. Yeah.
Because an adventure will be rewarding intellectually, emotionally. You will learn things. And some of those learnings you can apply at a later stage. You can see in people who have reached success that they usually had a number of failures beforehand.
Right.
Twitter grew out of the company Audio, which grew out of the company Blogger, which grew out of other companies. So usually you have a persistent individual. They are bright, they are smart, they've got good thoughts, but they stumble, they fail, they misthink, they mispredict, they get caught up into something. They have the wrong idea at the right time, or vice versa. But over time then they gather things. So as you go a few years down the line, it's not luck. They can't help but be successful because they've acquired so much. But I would say you need to take a luck and skill perspective, because there's something called the paradox of skill. And the paradox of skill means that when everybody is equally skillful, has the same skill level, luck plays an important part.
Right.
So, for instance, in the Olympics, everybody in the 100-meter dash or the 100-meter butterfly, right, to take a very good example,
right.
Michael Phelps and Milorad Savic, they're both swimming, they're equally good, but Michael Phelps beats Mr. Savic with 1/1000th of a second. And that comes down to luck. Had Mr. Phelps competed a much inferior swimmer, it would have been only skill, but there are these luck elements.
Right.
Which comes back to the importance of being a contrarian. Because once you're in with everybody else and we're equally skillful, you rely on luck.
Right.
So find your own pool to swim in. Right? This is what we talk about as blue ocean strategy, right, and red ocean strategy. I like to talk about it instead of, do you want to compete or create? Because competition is about competitors, customers, who are they? It's about the status quo, it's about the now. Creation is about, which great company is nobody building? Which idea do you only have? Which is your authentic idea? That when you share it, other people don't really understand what it is you're saying, but it's good. I mean, that's got much more potential, I think.
Okay.
But the problem is, of course, if you're competitive, you win awards. If you're creative, you make enemies. Oh, in a sense, right?
Oh, yeah. But I mean, that's a risk you should take.
No, but it's a painful risk. Let's not forget that. Most people don't wake up saying, I want to upset people.
No, of course.
Because it's painful. I mean, Karl Marx said this well. Revolution never comes from the middle classes, because the middle class don't really want anything. They might want some tax benefits and maybe one more week of holiday, but they in essence want to keep things the way they were. So revolution always happens on the fringes, and similarly creation always happens at the fringes. Right. It's people who are deviants, who have the courage to wake up in the morning and say, it's okay to make some enemies, break some eggs.
So creativity is a revolutionary, you're saying?
Well, creativity is a cliche today. So the problem is that creativity is everywhere, which means it's nowhere. Everybody has to be creative, and we call everything creative. But I think, you can think of it in terms of progress, right? And progress is a little bit like humor. And I can't tell you to think something is funny. That's why dictatorships have never had good stand-up comedians, because you can't force people to think it's funny. Humor is like, either it's funny or it's not. It's binary. And science's progress is the same thing. A plane either flies or it doesn't. Right? A person either lives longer or not. A child either lives or dies. I mean, these are the binary measurements of progress. And I would say real, true creativity is about enabling progress. Enabling something to live longer, thrive, fly better, whatever it might be. And we can't sort of have an opinion on that. And creativity has become too subjective. It's like, well, I think it's creative. Imagine if we use that to medicine, right?
Right, yeah.
Well, I think vomiting all night is healthy. Well, there's some things you can't have an opinion on. It's either true or false. It's 1 or 0. So I would say maybe we need to find a new word, reinvent the word creativity, progressivity, enemy making. I don't know.
Okay. One last question. In one of your books, you say something that it's quite cliche in a way, but...
Sorry.
No. I mean, everybody says that a crisis is also an opportunity.
Yeah.
And you explain it quite well, and saying that you can make, when you create, you can make mistakes, and you probably fail more than those that don't create, but all the crises that you have can create something new and bring an opportunity. What do you mean by that?
So, one of the things human beings do when we find pain is that we try to fit the pain into a story. And the story should have meaning. Why did that child die of cancer? Surely they were needed in heaven or in a better place. Why did that person fail? Oh, to learn. Why am I hurting right now? Well, you need to learn something. You can use this. And that's seductive because it adds meaning. Adding meaning adds comfort. My point probably only works on a macro perspective. I don't think you can tell a person in a crisis, this is really great, you can use this.
No, yeah,
that's the definition of being an asshole.
Yeah.
But on a macro level, we can see how, that person was in a painful place. And as somebody once said, you only move when it hurts. So because they were in a painful place, they were forced to re-examine certain things, take different paths. Because they took different paths, they discovered something different, something new. So further on down the line, we saw the end result. So I'm not sure you're able to use that. Furthermore, one of the reasons we talk about crisis opportunity is because there's a misunderstanding that the Chinese character for crisis is opportunity and danger, which is not true, in effect. The Chinese character for crisis is crisis, dangerous situation. So, but then again, we need pep talks. Meaning, we are meaning-seeking, pattern-seeking, storytelling animals. So that's part of what I do, I guess, as a futurologist, try to find the stories we haven't heard yet, but should be telling.
In studying patterns of the present and the future, can you tell me something about the next 2 or 3 years? Is there something that will happen or that is going to happen that is interesting for us as a society?
Sure.
Or as organizations, entrepreneurs?
It's a great question. It's a common question I get. And it was embedded in your question was also, what's something interesting? You want an event or a technology, an epiphany. Many of the things, unfortunately, will happen in the next 2 to 3 years are quite boring. Mm-hmm. And in terms of Europe, they are a little bit pessimistic because I believe the roots of the Euro crisis still haven't been solved. When I meet my friends in Spain, enlightened entrepreneurs, successful, they say the problem in Spain is corruption. Mm-hmm. It's not that we're stupid or we're building too much or we're addicted to cheap credit, it was corruption. We are a corrupt country. Will Spain become less corrupt in the next 2 to 3 years? Unfortunately not, which means that youth unemployment will remain high, volatility as well. We will, in the next couple of years, talk more about growth. There will be some surprising stories. I'd keep my eyes on the Baltics for sure. Where do I expect the surprises to come, the positive surprises? Well, one of the interesting things now is that entrepreneurship is starting to look like popular culture. Because popular culture has always been surprising. Wow, people all of a sudden want to have red t-shirts.
Right.
listen to a song called What Does the Fox Say? This is amazing. And business is starting to become a little bit like that. Creating a surprise hit once a year, a website, a portal, a product, a gadget, and so on. One of the most interesting spaces to watch, I believe, is the whole life logging movement, as it's combined with big data. Life logging is, of course, people recording everything they do and putting these things online so others can see it and scrutinize.
Right.
And what happens when many people do that is that we start seeing patterns that we haven't seen before. It's like a live social science experiment. Yeah. And social science has always been the bastard child of sciences. It's not real science, right? It's sort of fake experiments and opinions. But now we're actually going to start seeing some of those things happening. Like, people are recording their life in real time across the masses. We have the ability to process vast amount of information. And we are going to find clues in this. Maybe we will learn that laziness was a virus. Mm-hmm. It was, and Einstein happened to be suffering from that virus, but now we can cure it. Maybe we'll learn the opposite, that, one of the reasons we are addicted to caffeine today. And so, is that, there was some sort of fatigue virus, similar. We're going to learn so many interesting things that might sound weird or magical today, because science always does beforehand. So I would watch the life logging in big data space. I'm also in awe of the new generation of, it's called the fourth generation of feminism. Because for the first time, feminism isn't a radical left-wing combative movement. This time, it's a business-boosting entrepreneurial movement. Mm-hmm. Women starting company, women becoming the CEO, female boards, female presidents, sometimes created with a little bit of a battle. And that's interesting because women are different. They have a different attitude to risk-taking. They are, it seems like, a little bit more intelligent on average than men. They take different kinds of risks, and this is going to change business. Will we see it in the next 3 years? Of course, not all consequences, but I would say that in most countries, this movement will shape a big part of the dialogue of the conversation. Italy is a little bit behind there. This is a problem for Italy. Goldman Sachs have stated quite clearly that should Italy reach the same level of female participation in the labor force, GDP in Italy would rise by 40%.
Wow.
Yeah. And this is just the same, the EU average. I come from Sweden, we have a high average. Yeah. So Sweden is strange. But the EU norm, if Italy just boosts that by 10-20% coming to the EU norm, GDP would increase by 40%. This is the magic of economical growth. When more people participate in the labor force, we see unforeseen consequences.